nowadays we know that bison have a different impact than cattle on grazing and the importance of bison. I think people are really starting to wrap their head around just what an impact bison has on the landscape and what impact bison then have on the number of species that you can have and the biodiversity in an area.
Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome to Your Forest. I'm Matthew Kristoff. On this podcast, we talk about the environment and the science of sustainability. This podcast is a forum for people to have conversations around interesting information regarding research and management being done on the environment. And yeah, it's just conversations, right? And it doesn't necessarily represent the views of the sponsors, but yeah, it's a cool opportunity to have discussions with people that know what's up. Today's episode is an episode that I could not be more excited to have. I've recently had a obsession with bison, or American or Canadian buffalo, and yeah, they're just a fascinating species that's so crucial to the ecology of the landscape, to the survival of the original inhabitants of North America, as well as the creation of current Western society in the United States and Canada, totally dependent on the fur trade, and bison played a huge role in that. And yeah, and the conservation effort has been incredible as well. So like there's a huge population pre-contact, pre-colonization, and then a massive die-off because of commercial hunting, basically, and then a great conservation effort the last 100 years to bring them back to some kind of level, and continued efforts, right? And it's really, really cool. It's a good story. I brought Greg Wilson on. Greg Wilson is a bison ecologist with Parks Canada, and yeah, he's been doing research into all kinds of animals, mainly bison. That's where his passion lies, he told me. He's done stuff with chronic wasting disease in white-tailed deer and mule deer, done stuff with the caribou habitat and that kind of stuff. So all kinds of stuff. But right now he's working in Elk Island National Park. Just got that job recently this year in 2019, actually. And yeah, he came on to talk all about bison. So we talked about everything from how they came to North America, across the Bering Land Bridge, what kind of animals they came with, how all the other animals kind of went extinct and the bison managed to survive. And then when the first inhabitants of North America came across the land bridge, their dependence on bison, and a lot of the reason they came might have been for bison, and then getting into, the commercial hunt that happened when colonization happened, and the massive die-off of species that happened then, and then finally ending off the last probably 30, 40 minutes on happy notes, talking about the actual success story around bison coming back, and some of the challenges and some of the hope and some of the cool messages. So it was a great opportunity. Greg is a great speaker, so you guys are going to love it. They're an iconic species, bison. And yeah, sponsors for this episode, our number one sponsor is West Fraser. West Fraser has been a sponsor for the last couple of years, and without them, it would not have the reach and the opportunity that it has had. So I really appreciate their sponsorship, as well as the work that they're doing to make sure that we have a sustainable landscape, whether that's, worrying about species at risk, or dealing with wetland conservation, or indigenous consultation stuff, or anything, all the stuff that they go above and beyond to do. So I appreciate everything they do. Thank you. And also Green Lake Forestry has been a sponsor from the beginning. They, again, doing great work in the forest industry. And Damaged Timber is the last sponsor. They are an apparel company, and they're coming out with some new stuff that you guys are going to be into, some wood stuff. It's going to be cool. And yeah, you can check them out at damagedtimber.com. 10% of everything they sell goes towards a environmental sciences scholarship. And yeah, you get 10% off if you go to their website and type in Your Forest 10 at checkout. So check them out. And yeah, without any further messing around, let's dive right into it. Talking about bison, a lost icon, you could say. So, yeah, here we go. obsession with the whole bison thing came from, well, the main obsession currently over the last couple of years has been from that book, American Buffalo by Stephen Ranella, right? And he was talking about the basically the whole history of it from the glacial period into the commercial hunts into depicting he calls it buffalo, right? He has, I'll get into that. And anyways, it was just fascinating because it provided a lot of context for me regarding the importance of bison for not just the establishment of Canada, but the establishment of like the original inhabitants of Canada, and as well as just the ecology of it. And like, there's just so much, I think there's so much there that the average person, or like most people, even the environmental sciences field, don't know about the importance of that, the important role that, bison played in Canada or North America as a whole, I suppose. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, so that led me down the road to trying to find somebody. Luckily, I found you. I'm looking forward to this. So, what drove your passion? How did you get into, talking about bison and dedicating your whole life towards, this kind of stuff?
Well, it started, I guess, when I was pretty young, and my grandfather used to take me camping at Elk Island National Park. And
I like the story already.
That's home to pretty important plains bison herd and a pretty important wood bison herd for bison conservation in Canada and North America.
Yeah.
And so just having that experience in my youth, and then when I was in university, I kind of fell in love with population genetics, and as hard as it may be to believe.
Genetics is one of these completely fascinating, but the word genetics, I think, is such it's a pretty monotone word for most people, I think. But not for me. I like it.
Yeah, and population genetics is like genetics, but more math. Mm-hmm. So that's not really a big draw.
So a double snooze, I guess. People, it's not sexy. Yeah, it's not an explosion. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So, yeah.
And then started my grad school. I was able to combine those two passions, population genetics and bison, and I looked at population genetics of bison throughout North America. And since then, through my career, I've kind of still have a population genetics passion, but I've become more of a well-rounded ecologist. And
nice.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before we get into the deep and dirty of it, one thing that was brought up in that book that I was telling you about that I thought was interesting was the difference between bison and buffalo. And you tell me, because I know it started as buffalo, right, and then became bison once the scientific Linnaean name came into play, right? Yeah. Do you know where the name buffalo came from? Like, do you know how that evolved?
Well, it came from people coming to the New World and thinking that they weren't necessarily in the New World, and seeing new creatures and relating them to what they were familiar with. So for buffalo, it would be water buffalo and Cape buffalo, and they saw these creatures here in North America and said, well, those remind me of, and so they got the same name.
Gotcha. Yeah, they're both bovine animals, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
So they're not related directly, I suppose.
No, not that close, though.
Right. Okay. Yeah, in that book there, he was talking about, just to add some more specificness to it, he was saying that it was roughly Shakespeare's time, and these are his words, kind of, paraphrased, but it was roughly around Shakespeare's time where there was a military people wore a coat called a buff coat, I guess.
Right.
And it was made from like a thick leather, generally from any animal that produced such leather was called a buff, or buffalo, or whatever, right? And it was so like anything from a moose to a manatee to a whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there, when they came to the New World, obviously, bison got that same name. And then eventually, apparently, according to him anyways, I don't know if it's true, I haven't backed it up besides listening to him, but he seems to be pretty well researched, so I'm going to trust him for a minute. And apparently he was saying that eventually all the other animals managed to get their own names, and that the North American buffalo was left with the sole, name of buffalo. And then from there, it got confusion because of the water buffalo and the what was the other one? The Eurasian? The Cape buffalo. Cape buffalo, yes. And they're not related, so then it's, yeah. So it was interesting because the whole book, he calls it American buffalo. And I was like, he's really doesn't want to go with the, I guess there's a lot of confusion though, right? Even today, like 100 years after, I don't know how long ago they named it. How long ago did the Linnaean name come in?
Oh, it was in the 1700s for sure.
Oh, 1700s. So
yeah.
oh shit. Okay, so a while back.
Yeah.
And so 200-300 years later, there's still, I would say, most people still call it buffalo. Like the general public, right?
Yep.
So it's two perfectly good names, I guess, but one's definitely scientifically better. So what do you prefer? I'm guessing you prefer bison.
Yeah, I prefer bison. Yeah, just being in the scientific field, but
right.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Do people get uppity about it? Like, do you find scientists getting uppity about people calling it buffalo?
Not really. I mean, it's just so common, to have it referred to as buffalo that people are just used to it.
Right. It is what it is. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. You had a smile there, like a couple people that maybe get offended, but
some people get offended about anything, right?
Oh, that's very true. Good point. Yes, excellent point. Okay, so I wanted to start with like way back and start with the establishment of bison in North America. Can you speak to that?
A little bit.
Yeah, that's all we need. I'm
yeah.
not saying we need to go full detail here, but just kind of the general context of how they made it over and how they came to be the largest natural ranging land mammal in North America.
Sure. So there are a number of different types of bison that have existed. Bison priscus is the most recent common ancestor, as far as we know. But there's Bison latifrons, Bison occidentalis, and a few more as well.
Okay.
Basically, they came across the Bering Land Bridge, evolved over here, and I should say right now there's a number of different theories as to how exactly
this is all theoretical at this point.
They all came together. Not everyone, but there's certainly different stories that people prefer.
Yep.
But
and that was like 100,000 years ago, I think.
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah,
when the land bridge was opened. Okay, so well before people ever made it over here.
Well before people ever made it over here, for sure.
Okay,
and then the land bridge closed, of course. But during the meantime, they evolved into the different types here in North America, and they spread throughout the continent, basically.
Right.
And as time went on, you had different types, and as you know, most of the megafauna became extinct in North America.
All the massive sloths and
all the crazy stuff like beavers as big as your car and mammoths and the sloths were the weirdest one for me. When I first saw one of those giant ground sloths, that weirded me out. Yeah,
what do you mean? There's like a 800-pound sloth dragging itself along the forest floor. Like, how did that thing not get killed?
Yeah.
Anyways, there was a lot of huge animals back then, and so and then it was around how long ago was that mass die off? Do you remember? I know if you go to the Royal Alberta Museum, they'll tell you exactly.
10,000, I think, if I remember correctly.
10,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
just that would have been, and people showed up here around. So far, our understanding is 13,000 roughly, and they would have came across. We still don't know, but we think it was the Bering Land Bridge as well. And okay. So that was still open at that time.
Yeah. And so, and the arrival of humans was certainly not coincidentally when you started losing a lot of these megafauna as well. They were just easy for people to hunt. But so bison had been evolving at the same time. They'd moved back across the Bering Land Bridge.
Right.
So, and then came back again. So the bison that we have today have hybridized from bison that have always been in North America and bison that had moved back across the land bridge and come across. And bison that we have today are also it's hard to believe, but they're the smallest bison that have ever existed.
So what's the biggest bison that you know of? It's Bison latifrons, I think?
Yeah. And these are the ones that had horns that are, stick 6 feet out either side of their heads and just
a real
crazy
mess.
thing.
Yeah. How do you know roughly how big those were? How much bigger? Just for context.
Off the top of my head, they're going to be probably 2.5 times bigger, something like that.
And what's the average size of a current bison?
So the wood bison are larger than the plains bison. The wood bison can be about 1,000 kilograms.
Okay, so over 2,000 pounds. Yeah. Okay. And then so these, you said it was latifrons?
Yes.
And that one could be 5, 6 200,000.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a big animal. Good Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be fascinating to see one of those a day, right? Like we look at science fiction, like all we need to do is look into our past to find science fiction animals, right? Like I don't think we need to go very further don't have to go outside of the earth to see stuff that's weird. So, and then, and anyways, the die off of the megafauna, that was, they're still sorting that out too. There's all kinds of theories around humans being around during that time, but also a massive climate shift and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And for some reason, apparently, the bison ended up being the largest one to survive.
Yes.
And become extremely prominent, if I'm not correct, right? Like they're the most prominent land mammal in North America for a very, very long time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, let's do we know around the time of say the original inhabitants coming to Canada around 13,000 years ago, do we know roughly how many bison there? Like obviously this would all be an estimate, and you know what I mean, educated guess, but roughly like how many would have been around back in that time?
Yeah, an educated guess for sure, but I mean we're talking millions.
Millions. Okay. Yeah. So they're very, very, and it's slightly different landscape too, more plains, I'm assuming, and not as much forest and that kind of stuff. So okay.
Yeah, and at that time actually the Woodland Plains bison wouldn't have even differentiated.
Oh, okay. So it was still because they're the same species still. They're just
correct,
different
subspecies.
But there was a time where we thought that the plains and the wood buffalo were actually different, right? Because wasn't the wood buffalo called Bison Athabasca at one point?
It was always Bison Athabasca.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it was Bison Athabasca. So it was like a subspecies almost.
Correct. Yeah.
But now I realized it's not a subspecies. It's just a.
Well, that's
yeah. Let's work that out. What's the deal there? What's the deal there?
Yeah, it's
you're the geneticist. You tell me what's going on.
It's a complicated one. It's definitely a very complicated one.
Okay.
Basically, there are two confusing factors. One being, were Woodland Plains bison ever good subspecies? And one of the problems there is that we don't really have a good definition of what subspecies are. A lot of the definitions that people have used for subspecies are the same ones that they've used for species. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's a difference, obviously, between a species and a subspecies.
Science is supposed to have defined rules. What is going on?
Defined rules, but arbitrary at the same time when you're dealing with something like what is a subspecies.
Sure. Okay.
So the best definitions are it's somewhere between a population and a species.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a brutal definition.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And then to complicate matters even further, during the early 1900s, there was basically one herd of wood bison left. And it was in Wood Buffalo National Park, about 3,000 animals, give or take.
Okay.
Around 6,600 plains bison were shipped up to Wood Buffalo National Park at the same time.
Yeah.
And those bison hybridized to some level that we don't really know. So the wood bison that we have today are not the wood bison that we had before that hybridization.
Gotcha. Is that the only, was that the sole surviving naturally found wood bison?
It was.
There was nothing else.
There was nothing else at the time. Yep.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So genetically, we're talking like a pretty small group. You said 3,000?
Yeah.
3,000.
Yeah.
So how much of a concern is that genetically to have that small of a group left over?
Yeah. You know what? As far as bison populations go, and Wood Buffalo National Park population had a low of 250.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So
when was that?
That would have been turn of the last century.
Okay.
In 1896, give or take, there would have been about 250 animals left. And Wood Buffalo National Park actually was created to protect the last herd of wood bison and their habitat.
Good googly moogly. So 250 left.
Yeah.
That's definitely a problem genetically, no?
Well, you know what? Looking at bison on the whole, for plains bison, a lot of plains bison wish they could have had 250 founders. Like they're starting from a dozen animals, sometimes less. So, I mean, not ideal, but it is what it is. It's not concerning relative to other bison populations. And then, it's not a good thing that those plains bison got shipped up there, but at the same time, it was an influx of new genetic diversity to the point where we don't know what wood bison looked like genetically before that happened.
Sure.
But now, the Wood Buffalo National Park population is one of the most genetically diverse bison populations in the world.
Oh, that's good.
Which is good. Absolutely.
We don't know what that means relative to the natural, but I mean, that's gone. So we have to deal with what we got now, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So just to back up a little bit more before we get into too deep into the current like situation, I want to provide some more context of how we got to where we're at now. So if that's cool with you. So roughly, did we say roughly how long ago? It was like roughly 5,000 years ago that the current animal evolved into what it is that we know of today. Okay. So there was roughly an 8,000 year period where humans and the older bison types lived amongst each other. And so how important was, from what I understand, the bison was like, for a lot of, especially the plains tribes and that kind of stuff, it was crucially important to their entire way of life, right?
Yes.
So that's something that was, there was even arguments that I heard from varying sources saying that may have been the main reason that they had originally crossed the Bering Land Bridge, was following bison herds, because they're, for whatever reason, I guess easy to hunt or something. I don't know. But so yeah, how important really, can you provide some context there? What was the existence of bison to the original inhabitants?
Yeah, it was, I don't want to go all the way to say that it was everything, but it was extremely important. It was a fairly common food source that people could follow around and have access to throughout the year. And as you say, easy to find, because you're getting into, large herds of animals. So
like how large are we talking?
Hundreds of thousands could be. So once you know what these herds are, you can follow them and have this constant source of, well, I said food, but it's not just food. It's food and tools and teepees and everything else that the indigenous people at the time used bison for everything. It
was everything. Yeah, they used the hides for clothing, for covers on teepees, they ate every part of it. They ate the organs. They made tools. Like if you go to the Royal Alberta Museum here, the new exhibit, I think most of the bone tools that they have are made from bison bone, and they're going back 13,000 years. They've got evidence of that, right?
Yeah.
So like they were making awls and all kinds of stuff, right? Like it's fascinating to see just how integrated into the lifestyle of the original inhabitants of North America that creature was. So like arguably without that creature, we may not have had people the way we did end up having.
Right.
Them,
yeah.
right?
That's the argument that Stephen Ranella makes there in his book, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. Very, very interesting. And what made, obviously a group of 100,000 head is obviously a massive, like it's hard, you're not going to miss that, right? I'm sure you can hear that from miles away walking around, right? Or even just dust clouds and stuff. Like it's probably
Wouldn't that be amazing?
It'd be ridiculous. Like I the whole time I was reading that book, I was fantasizing about just having, like, driving to Calgary and just seeing bison crossing the highway, like a big, massissive herds.
You have to stop for like a day because bison are just crossing.
You got to set up camp. That'd be all right with me. Like, sorry, I couldn't make it to work. There was bison crossing the road. Had to set up camp and watch. Like, that would be pretty wicked. It's never going to happen. It's totally, we're past that now. Yeah, the industrial machine has moved forward, and we're in that stage. But yeah, that would be incredible. Just be one of those people crossing the Bering Land Bridge, 13,000 years ago, following some friggin' dust cloud that's 100 miles away because there's 100,000 head of them, right? Like I can't even fathom what that would be like, but it's cool. It's very, very cool. And then, is there evidence of the importance of like the woods bison to like the northern, like the northern tribes that lived in the forest and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So it's the wood bison has a different way of life.
Sure.
They have the much smaller herds, and solitary is definitely not the right word, but they're certainly much more solitary than plains bison are. So they're a little harder to make a living on, especially when you have massive herds of barren ground caribou that are rolling around.
That's what I was going to compare them to, actually. would it be fair to compare them to the barren land caribou versus the woodland caribou? Kind of the same idea.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, same kind of idea. On the barren ground, you group up for protection and survival. And when you're in the thick, heavy bush, you want less of that because you want less evidence that you were ever there. So it's pretty fair. Okay. So that was my question, because from a lot of accounts from earlier explorers and that kind of stuff, there was people who were commercial bison hunters and had never claimed to have seen a wood bison because they're so elusive or whatever. But so obviously the plains bison was the prominent species, I would assume. Across the Great Plains.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's fascinating to think about the importance to the humans and then the importance to the ecology as well. Because you're going to have 100,000 head of animal in one herd, and whatever. I think at one point I saw they said at the beginning of the 1700s there was an estimated 32 million. Or some craziness. I don't know if that was a peak population.
Yeah, I've seen estimates as high as 60 million.
60 million.
Yeah.
300, 400 years ago.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
It is really hard to imagine.
Do we have anything that's that prominent besides ants? We can't. Is there that many squirrels? There might be that many squirrels.
Oh boy, yeah, there might be. Yeah,
but there's not that many. I can't imagine there's that many deer. And I would say deer is probably the closest thing we have to a really down in the States, the white-tailed deer is just rampant, right? But I can't imagine we have that many.
No,
60 million, and this is a 1 to 2,000 pound animal we're talking about, not a 150 to 300 pound animal. So yeah, the impact that must have on the ecology of a landscape must be ridiculous.
Massive. Yeah. So we call them keystone species. So they impact. So many, and it's even nowadays we know that bison have a different impact than cattle on grazing and the importance of bison. I think people are really starting to wrap their head around just what an impact bison has on the landscape and what impact bison then have on the number of species that you can have and the biodiversity in an area.
So you can almost. Would it be fair to say, I have to be careful when I'm saying stuff like this, but I tend to get excited. I'm like, oh, is this, so that means this, my mind goes places and I jump to conclusions. But so it would be fair to say that the species richness that exists, without bison is going to be much lower than that exists with. It's going to be something that we've definitely lost. You could say that we've definitely lost habitat because of the loss of bison.
Yeah, absolutely. So, cattle are more sort of homogeneous grazers. So they graze everywhere equally, give or take.
Yep.
And bison are more heterogeneous grazers, which means they hit some areas really hard and hit some areas not as hard. So you get this heterogeneous landscape, and it opens up habitat for species that, plant animal species that are really more interested in the areas that are heavily disturbed and the ones that's a lot less disturbance.
So just that makes sense, and probably providing a lot more opportunity for seed travel and for all kinds of stuff right?
Yeah, it's everything for sure. It's the just like you say, them inhaling seeds and spreading those around, inhaling fungi spores and spreading those around, and it's without bison on the landscape doing these things, it has a major impact for sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to I'm trying to contextualize that importance, right? Obviously our landscape today is vastly different than it was even 300 years ago when we still had these roaming giant herds, right? Which is crazy to try to imagine, right? Because that's a prominent point that I bring up constantly in these episodes. It seems to come up, the fact that the forest and wildlife, or the landscapes that we have today, are not the landscapes of 300 years ago, pre-colonization, right? We have much more homogeneous landscape, just kind of period across, whether it's, the plains are all agriculture at this point. The forest has been we've stopped fighting, or we started fighting fires. So now we have this homogeneous kind of age level of the forest, and compared to previous, I'm not saying that's necessarily good or bad, just that it's compared to what the historical natural range was, it's different. It's definitely more homogeneous, less variation. And so it's interesting to hear that, the bison played a role in doing that on the plains, as much as fire suppression had a role in changing that in the forest, right? So it's
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it's wild. And so I want to get into like colonization. And so we've established the fact that this is a crucially important species. Actually, no, one more thing first. Actually, before we get into that, I want to talk about buffalo jumps.
Okay.
What's the deal with buffalo jumps? Because like so you have this massive herd, right?
Yep.
And the idea of a massive herd committing mass suicide because they're being chased by a much smaller, much fewer number of predators seems weird to me. And I'm sure it has something to do with the psychology of being chased down by something that you're afraid of and herd mentality and stuff. But can you explain to me kind of like how so many indigenous groups were able to be so crazy successful at, you know what I mean, pushing whole herds off of cliffs to their death, and then like to the point where they literally had so much excess that they were just doing choice cuts, right? They were just taking what they needed and leaving most of it to rot and for the carrion and stuff like that. Right.
Well, there's a number of factors. One is they're an extreme herding animal. It's really important to them to stay together in a group.
Okay.
It's hard to think of more animals that are, we talked about bearing ground caribou would certainly be one.
Okay.
But,
there you go. We can buffalo jump caribou. Let's go.
Maybe.
For
it. I think they have enough problems of their own.
Probably leave them be.
So there's that aspect, so that when you get them moving, they all want to stay together.
Sure.
And it's funny, actually, when I was just driving here, I was on the Henday, and someone had lost a tire off their vehicle, and it was sitting in the middle lane.
Yeah.
So you're driving along, and all of a sudden the guy in front of you veers, and you're like, oh my God, there's a tire like right in front of me.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing, right? It's the bison behind. They don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
They can't see. They're just following really closely the guy in front of them, and the guy in front of them goes off the cliff, and then you go too because you didn't know it was there.
So is it like? But I'm imagining the first bison to go off the cliff, which I'm guessing is probably a lead cow, probably, right? It seems like most herd animals have like the lead animal is actually a cow.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Wouldn't you see the cliff? Like,
but at that point, you got a lot of pressure from behind too.
I guess, hey,
it's not that easy to stop when you have 1,000 bison behind you.
Yeah, like what's top clip for a bison?
Oh, they can easily run faster than people, that's for sure.
I would assume so. The four-legged transportation generally does, yeah.
I think it's around 45, 50 kilometers an hour, if I remember correctly.
So 45 kilometers an hour. Like, how long would that take for them to stop? I'm guessing it probably takes them a few dozen meters to stop.
Yeah, you know what? They can stop pretty quick.
Can they? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering if maybe there's like one thing I've heard that I don't know if it's true or not. Almost an optical illusion on the plains, whereas like it looks like it's continuous landscape, and then all of a sudden it's not. And by that point, it's too late or something. Is that something that
I think that can come into play as well? Yeah,
yeah. It's just an interesting. I don't know. It's a fascinating way that the original inhabitants managed to survive, and that it's just weird. It's just weird that happens. But I guess it has to do with herd mentality, and just I guess you think about people and mob mentality, right? The things that mobs will do that no individual human would ever consider rationally doing. And you're like, okay, there's something to being in a group that's going to cause you to do some stuff that is maybe outside of your character or outside of your most, I guess your direct benefit.
Sure. And you have to remember that before humans they were hunted by wolves, and the best way that they could avoid being taken down by wolves is you get the herd running, and you try to put the larger individuals on the outside,
right,
and the wolves have to try to work their way in somehow. So they're used to thinking that this rapid movement is a good way to get away from a threat.
Absolutely. That was the best way to do it for hundreds of thousands of
years.
So it's like, why would they change for humans, right? Yeah. It's going to be a hell of a tough time for a wolf, for like 100-pound wolf to take down a 2,000 pound. I'm sure they're not going for the bulls. They're going for the smaller calves and the old and stuff. But still, that's got to be a hell of a time trying to take down a bison. That must be
Yeah, especially there's so Wood Buffalo National Park, which we mentioned earlier.
Yep.
It has.
We'll get back to it. Don't worry. We're getting there. We're getting there. Building context. This is going to be a long conversation.
It has the only unbroken relationship between bison and wolves in North America.
Unbroken. So
there have been bison and wolves there for Lord knows how long.
Huh.
And it's amazing the work that the wolves have to do to be able to take the bison down. They almost have football plays where they're like, okay, we're going to put 2 wolves over here and these 3 are going to try to chase the bison this direction. And
they strategize.
They strategize, absolutely. And it boggles my mind how they manage to communicate that to each other.
Terrifyingly smart animals.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but as a consequence, like the herds or the packs rather are much larger in Wood Buffalo National Park than the wolf packs than otherwise, because they need to have a number of animals to be able to take a bison down.
I see it's out of necessity.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to get the herd going, to be able to
exactly
to create the confusion and chaos that they can take advantage of. Gotcha. Okay. Cool. That's interesting that Wood Buffalo National Park has always had bison.
They've always had bison.
Huh. Yeah. I didn't know that. I thought it was something that was like after the commercial hunt and the kind of eradication of bison in most of their area, that was something that that we had established and then put them back in. But there was always a natural herd there.
Yes, so there are only 2 in North America. Yeah. Yellowstone National Park has had an unbroken relationship, and Wood Buffalo National Park.
So going from that, okay. So I wanted to talk about, we'll get into the colonization, and I want to talk about the commercial hunt and that kind of stuff. So my understanding is, so people showed up here, picked up on the fact that there's millions upon millions, tens of millions of these giant, massive animals running around that are relatively easy to hunt, I guess, compared to moose and elk and deer and that kind of stuff. At what point I'm guessing that ever since they came over, the colonizing forces, that there was probably some kind of focus on bison. But at what point did it become that did they realize how potentially or I don't know how to word it, but how monetarily important that resource was, and did they start? When did they actually start the commercial hunt to the extent that we know and remember today?
So are we talking about indigenous groups or Europeans?
Sorry, I know indigenous groups did that. There was a lot of that was part of it, I guess. So yeah, I'm talking about the commercial hunt as far as not non-indigenous groups doing hunting for their own tribes, but more for the commercial sale. Right?
Gotcha.
That kind of stuff. So when did that begin? When did we start selling hides and that kind of stuff, and that push for industrial gain or goods and services instead of just hunting for survival type thing?
Yeah, I don't think that took very long. Once Europeans arrived in North America and started pushing west, you start noticing millions of bison pretty quickly. And also noticing that the indigenous groups are making full use of them, and that there's a lot of value for bison.
Right. Do you know? Because I've noticed so the height of the commercial hunt when we really started doing it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was that the end of the 1800s? Was the mass? Was the big? I know that it was going on for a long time.
Yeah,
but when it really got going and ramped up to the point where they were killing millions a year.
Mm-hmm. That'd be 1870s.
1870s, around that time. Mm-hmm. And I read somewhere that the entirety of the massive push of the commercial hunt might have been as short as 12 years, or like maybe a couple of decades or something like that.
Yeah, once people really put their minds to it, they wiped bison out pretty quickly. Yeah.
So that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So we went from a population of potentially tens of millions, 30 to 60 million bison in the 1700s, and maybe what was the estimated population when colonization happened? Do you know, of plains and woods bison together? Kind of.
Yeah,
thing?
I mean it would be tens of millions.
Still
for sure.
Tens of millions.
Yeah.
So wouldn't be unreasonable to say 30 million.
Nope, not unreasonable.
In North America. Yeah. Okay. So in a period of roughly 12 years, we went from 30-some million to how many?
The lowest is probably, if we're talking just plains bison, the lowest was probably about 1,000.
Lord. That's
incredible. It is absolutely incredible.
What? So you think about the entire existence of bison in North America for roughly 100,000 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
At these massive numbers of tens of millions of bison, and in a series of, and also sustainable populations being held by the indigenous inhabitants for 13,000 years, right? Like they lived harmoniously with those animals and took what they needed, and you know what I mean? I'm sure they put a dent in it, but also it didn't, not to the point where it became unsustainable. And then European settlers come over and we just messed them up. In a matter of 12 years, we killed 30 million.
Pretty much, yep.
I can't even imagine the amount of resources that would have had to go into that. Like, it seems unfathomable that back then, 130 years ago, 150 years ago, that they would have had the capacity to move that much meat and hides and bones and that kind of stuff. But obviously,
and a lot of it wasn't moved as well, right? It was just like they were shooting bison from trains just for fun.
Oh, and
so
it's just completely unregulated, just
exactly
Wild West stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that nuts though? Like, I feel like we would have a hard time killing that many wild animals today. I mean, we don't have that. I mean, we don't have that kind of prevalence of an animal now. I mean, besides caribou, maybe, but there's not that many. No, there's not even close to that many. There's like a few 100,000 caribou.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just something that blows my mind. So we
Absolutely.
went. So we had this massive ecological force, this huge species that was important for the ecology, for other species, for the original inhabitants, crucially important, and in a matter of 12 years, we managed to basically extirpate them.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how long did it take for society to recognize what we did, and to start pushing for, you know what I mean, the protection of and conservation of that species?
Sure. Not very long. And so I mentioned before there were about 1,000 plains bison, give or take. Mm-hmm. Most of those animals, it's not like there was a big herd somewhere. There were, a low of, I think, 25 in Yellowstone National Park.
Okay.
But they were just bits and bobs running around. And
it's such a small number. It's ridiculous. It seems
absolutely
unfathomable that they would bounce back from that.
Yes. Yeah, no, they certainly could have gone the other way. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So how did they manage to bounce back from that? Like I said, how long did it take for us to realize, was there a big push during the commercial hunt to be like, hey, whoa? Well,
when numbers started declining, there were certainly people that were making a living from bison. They were like, maybe this isn't such a great idea.
Right.
But what happened is, because bison are such herding animals, mm-hmm. when you only have 2-3 left here and there, often they would end up with people's cattle. And gotcha. Some of these people who had cattle were conservation minded, I guess, when it came to the bison, and they started trying to collect these animals and make private herds of bison. And so it was actually, for the most part, private individuals in the U.S. that really recovered plains bison.
Oh.
And then so there were probably, between 5 and 10 major ranchers that had bison.
Okay.
One of the more famous ones was Michel Pablo and Charles Allard.
Okay.
So it was known as the Pablo Allard herd.
Okay.
Michel Pablo was an indigenous man, and he was keeping the bison he was arranging them on reserve land.
Okay.
And the U.S. government was going to basically not let him do that anymore. So he had thousands of bison. This was in the early 1900s.
Oh, and he was managing them to so he probably started with a few, and he's
exactly,
he was actively managing to increase their herd. And
exactly.
Okay. So why did the government step in? Just the herd was getting too big, type thing, or
no? They wanted to use the area for cattle ranching.
Oh, okay.
So Michel Pablo had to find something to do with these bison. He tried to sell them to the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. It fell through, and he ended up selling them actually to the Canadian government, to Parks Canada.
Oh, okay.
And so in the early 1900s, these animals got shipped to Elk Island National Park.
Okay, that was in the 1900s that was established.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Was it established specifically for the influx of that herd?
It was actually established for elk conservation.
Elk Island National Park.
What happened was there was another national park called Buffalo National Park.
Okay.
It doesn't exist anymore. It's now CFB Wainwright.
Okay.
And the idea was they were going to ship all of the animals to Buffalo National Park, but Buffalo National Park wasn't fenced, and Elk Island National Park was. So they're like, oh, well, in the meantime, let's just throw them in Elk Island National Park. And the idea was they would then move them all out and ship them to Buffalo National Park. They ended up leaving 50 of them in Elk Island National Park, and there's some debate as to whether they were unable to round these ones up or if they kind of decided they liked having them around and were, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, unable to round them up, but, just left them there. And, but it's a huge conservation story for bison, because this is the Pabble-Wallard herd is, I think, really only represented in animals from Elk Island National Park.
Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah, so we had to get them so the Canadian government just purchased them from this.
That's right.
Yeah, from this dude.
Yeah, they were gone. Plains bison were gone from Canada.
Oh, really? They were totally extirpated from Canada. So all we had left was the wood bison and wood buffalo way up north.
That's right.
By Northwest Territories. Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So then, when was wood buffalo established? Like the actual park itself?
Yeah. So that was in the 1920s, but before then there were some protections put in place, and they actually had some RCMP officers, that's Northwest Mounted Police at the time, who were supposed to try to protect the wood bison before that, even before it was a national park.
Oh, okay. So it was something that we were aware of as soon as the commercial hunt started getting out of hand. They were like, okay, we need to start thinking about this. So there was recognition. It was just that the industrial machine was too powerful, and no one's stopping that thing once it gets rolling.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Like, what do you think the ramifications were? Like, do we have evidence of what happened directly, like ecologically speaking? I mean, what happened directly after that massive extirpation event of the commercial hunt?
Not a lot, but it would have massive repercussions, because so many species relied on bison to, like I was saying before, just open up habitats.
Yeah.
But there were also things like the amount of feces that 60 million bison were creating.
It's a lot of fertilizer.
For fertilizer that was now absent. Even things like bison hair was used by a number of small mammals and a number of birds for nesting.
Right.
And that was something that was no longer available.
So do you have like any species at the top of your mind that you could mention that were, like, obviously the lot were negatively affected, but any particular that were, like, maybe went extinct because of that event?
I think there was a decline in songbirds in the prairies.
Yeah.
Also,
they're pretty delicate species, generally speaking. So
ground squirrels and we're pretty reliant on. There was actually a sort of a mutual, I guess, relationship between bison and ground squirrels, and that they both really kind of liked really kind of bare soil, open areas. And so without bison, then the ground squirrels didn't have that as well.
Right.
There's also some of the sand dune obligate species probably were suffering as well. So in Suffield National Wildlife Area, there's been a loss of open sand, a loss of sand dunes over time. And there's a paper out that suggests that the reason this is happening is because they don't have bison in the area anymore. And they, in the paper, made a case for tracing the sand dunes back to buffalo wallows.
Oh, okay.
And so the buffalo would wallow, open up an area, it would become an open sand dune. And now that the bison are gone, here, look, I'm using buffalo and bison synonymously as well.
You got you doing it. Yeah.
But then they don't have that active force to keep these areas open.
Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you think about the sustainability of a prairie landscape. If it's got this constant influx of nutrients from bison crap, from tens of millions of head, so that's, I don't know how many pounds of turd that is, but it's a lot.
I don't know either.
And we took that land and turned it into something where we're just trying to to maximize crop growth and that kind of stuff to feed people. I'm not saying that, but it's just like, it's obviously the capacity, the natural capacity of that prairie landscape to produce grass and to produce vegetation is going to be massively, drastically reduced, right? So now we're finding ourselves in a place where we're forced to add. I don't know much about agriculture and how it works and everything, but like I'm assuming that there's a whole lot of fertilizer being put on the landscape to maintain what we're doing, right? So,
and it's not just the grasses as well; it's all the insects that rely on the feces as well. Yeah. And so you have fewer insects, and again, that's going to affect the songbirds and bats and everything else. So
so just a lot of problems.
It's being a keystone species. You can make the web out, and there's well over 100 species. I'm sure
a lot
were negatively impacted by the loss of bison.
Yeah, I guess that whole that negative impact was probably lost to the idea of kind of the massive influx of people and like into the prairies and building towns and starting.
And obviously, that had an impact too.
Everyone had other things on their mind besides, you know what I mean? You're trying to feed your family. You're not going to worry about some massive species that exists out there. You're just trying to feed your kids or whatever. So it's, it's an interesting problem. So it was kind of it almost seems like it was something that it was kind of overshadowed by the influx of people, right? Like that was the story, not the fact that the whole land is different now because the influx of people brought about the loss of a super important keystone species. But,
and I think it's really only been the last, few decades where we've, really been starting to wrap our head around just what an impact this has had and how important it is to have bison on prairie landscapes if you want to have, more of a natural ecosystem. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's wild. So, okay. Now that we've kind of established all of that, we can talk about parks a little bit more. Talk about the stuff that you're currently doing and all that. So both Wood Buffalo and National Park and Elk Island Provincial Park, right? National.
It is national too?
Yeah.
Okay, I always mess that up. And you're a national park wildlife ecologist. Obviously, that's where you work. It's going to be a national park, right? Think straight, Christoph. Working on it. So they were both established at the turn of kind of the 1900s there. Yep. And so what is the current status of those parks as far as population numbers? Because you said the Wood Buffalo had the natural herd of about 250 at one point in the late 1800s. Yeah. And then by the time they established the park up there, how many?
See, at that point it was around 2,500.
Okay, so
they were bouncing back for sure.
So do they produce a calf every year?
Yeah, for the they certainly can. They actually can have a pretty high growth rate, despite the fact that usually they're only producing singletons. Right. Okay. But you can have 2/3, 3/4 of the females producing calves every year.
Okay, so they have a pretty good fecundity. They come back pretty quick. Okay. Yeah. And then what about Elk Island? What was you said there was nothing there, and they brought in the herd from. Sorry, what was it?
It was in Montana, the Pablo Allard herd.
Pablo Allard herd. And that was how many, first of all, how many survived that trip?
It's shocking when you see the old photos of how they're rounding these bison up and putting them in crates and shipping them on the rail to Elk Island and then later to Buffalo National Park. It's like, it's crazy. How did this ever work? But it seemed to work pretty well. I've never really seen anything about survivor rates.
Sure.
But
I can imagine that's going to be stressful for a bison to jump on a train and be on that's going to be an interesting event. I can't imagine that every single individual made it okay. I got to imagine there was some amount of mortality.
I would imagine that's the case,
right? And so I read somewhere that there was about 800 bison in the Pablo Allard herd that were in Montana that were shipped to Elk Island.
Then the Elk Island population was reduced to 50 because all the rest of them were shipped to Buffalo National Park.
Oh, okay. So still not a lot compared to 32 million.
Exactly.
Or whatever. I don't know why I keep saying 32 million, but that's in my head now, so I'm sticking with it.
But a substantial portion of the bison that existed at that time.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. And what was the total population at that time in North America, you think?
Oh,
this is all guesstimation, I know.
Sure. But I would guess it would be in the 10,000, 12,000 range.
Oh, so like maybe as much as half.
Yep.
Okay. We're existing there. Okay. So why did they ship so much up to wood buffalo? Just because they didn't want them in Elk Island, like you were saying, or
so they went for there's Buffalo National Park and Wood Buffalo National Park, and they're different.
Yeah.
But so Buffalo National Park, it was getting decommissioned.
Yeah.
And so they had to do something to get rid of the bison, and they had probably like 10,000 bison at the time. So they decided that they were going to ship a number of them up to Wood Buffalo National Park, and this was in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there were a lot of ecologists who said this is a terrible idea, and we have one herd of wood bison left, and it's in Wood Buffalo National Park. But the government basically pushed it through, and so they barged these animals, 6,673 plains bison up into Wood Buffalo National Park.
That's an exact number. There we go.
Yeah, that is an exact number. And again, like you say, I'm sure 6,673 healthy bison did not arrive in Wood Buffalo National Park.
Sure.
But the exact number is unknown.
Right.
And then
so the main concern by the sorry to cut you off. The main concern by the ecologists was changing the wood bison herd into a predominantly plains bison.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah. And so they were released in an area where it was felt that it was isolated from the wood bison in Wood Buffalo National Park. Mm-hmm. But over time, these bison did spread throughout the park. We don't know to what extent hybridization occurred, but we also know that these bison that were shipped from Buffalo National Park to Wood Buffalo National Park brought with them bovine brucellosis and tuberculosis.
So it was in when this happened in the 1920s. Those animals had TB and brucellosis, and we didn't know about it. Or
so basically, yes. Well, we kind of did know about it, but probably not to the extent that it was. But they were kind of running Buffalo National Park is certainly not as we view national parks today, but they were doing a lot of experimenting with breeding bison with cattle to try to produce cattle and beefalo, and
right.
And
it was the first attempt at conservation. They're just trying to
okay, it was definitely more of a ranch than a real conservation project.
Yeah.
So these bison went up to Wood Buffalo National Park, and they brought these two diseases with them. Mm-hmm. So plains bison genes, tuberculosis and brucellosis spread to the wood bison in Wood Buffalo National Park.
So what? Just remind me. I don't recall what exactly is TB and brucellosis, and what are the implications of that disease? Right.
So tuberculosis is more of a lung disease, basically. Okay. And brucellosis is more reproductive tract, so it can make cows lose their calves. And so between the biggest problem though with these diseases is that they're reportable to the cattle industry. So if they get into cattle, we could have sort of a mad cow situation where the borders are closed to the movement of animals, of cattle to other countries.
Okay.
And it's also a big boon for the cattle industry to be in Canada, to be able to say, yes, we have tuberculosis and brucellosis free animals, and it makes them more desirable on the world market.
Oh, okay.
So these two diseases do have an impact on bison. There's some debate as to how much of an impact they have on bison. And we know that these diseases have been in Wood Buffalo National Park for 100 years.
Sure.
And we still have bison there.
Right.
So.
Okay. So what is the... so you say TB is a lung disease. Do we know what the mortality rate is with that among bison? Or
the estimate is, with these two diseases in Wood Buffalo National Park, that it's probably increased mortality by 4 to 6%.
Okay, so a bunch, but also it's not wiping them out. Or
exactly.
Like that. And what about brucellosis?
Yeah, so brucellosis in bison.
So you said the same. It was for both diseases.
For both of them, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, for it has more of an impact on fecundity because it can make if a cow has brucellosis, she'll lose her first calf, but it's usually only the first calf.
Does she pass that on?
So the way that brucellosis is passed on is basically through afterbirth.
Oh, okay.
So
they would, as they come out, they would collect, kind of like
The calf doesn't necessarily get it immediately, but it can get it very, very shortly after birth.
Oh, okay. And it's not a overly, like if an animal gets tuberculosis or brucellosis, it's not like a guarantee they're going to die, but does it affect them for the rest of their life, or does it eventually kind of go away, or is it like, what's the deal?
I was going to say they don't go away, but the proper answer probably is that we don't know.
Okay. So still sorting it out.
It's kind of a mystery. They don't have impacts quickly, for sure.
Sure.
These are diseases that are, well, like I said, they can affect fecundity. Brucellosis can affect fecundity early, but brucellosis and tuberculosis are mainly going to affect older animals.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the bison meat enjoyer in me wants to know, is that something that's passed on in the meat, or is that something that's only in the...
They can be in the meat.
So you could...
Tuberculosis especially,
You could get tuberculosis from eating infected bison meat?
Maybe.
Obviously, there's a risk.
I think maybe. Yes, I think there's a risk. Okay. So basically, if you harvest an animal and the animal has lesions inside that you can see, the idea is that you should just leave it.
Lesions on the lungs?
They can be anywhere, but they primarily in the lungs, but they can be anywhere.
Okay.
Because it might have tuberculosis, and you might be able to get tuberculosis from diseased meat. We don't know if this ever happening.
Okay, it's one of those ones where like, hey, we're like, kind of like CWD, like chronic wasting disease. We're like, hey, so far it hasn't happened. Doesn't mean it won't happen.
And even if you did have diseased meat, properly cooking it would make it safe to eat.
It would. Okay. It's not like chronic wasting disease where it's a proton.
No.
It's a protein thing where it can't be burned out. So if you did cook it to 165, you'd be okay.
Exactly.
Kind of like it's almost like eating black bears in the what do you call it? What's the parasite black bears get? Most predators get it. It's a worm or whatever. I'm having a brain fart right now. I can't remember. But anyways, if you cook those, same thing. A lot of black bears and wolves and that kind of stuff have it. And if you cook it to 165, it kills them. But obviously that's a parasite. This is
bacteria. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So, and brucellosis, can that be passed on? Do you know?
I don't believe it can.
Okay.
I haven't heard of it.
So that's one that you wouldn't really have to worry about as much,
right?
If you were to harvest one, because there is a hunt every now and again in Alberta.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
So the hunt is usually around in the Hazama area, and those animals are disease free.
Those ones are disease free.
Yes. So it's only Wood Buffalo National Park and some of the herds immediately surrounding Wood Buffalo National Park where their bovine brucellosis and tuberculosis are an issue.
Okay. And can we track all of those diseased animals back to that original herd that came from Montana, pretty much?
Actually, no. It's because the plains bison at Elk Island National Park have never had those diseases. So it didn't come from those animals from Montana. It came from something they did at Buffalo National Park.
Oh. So was there contact? You said there was a bunch of contact with cattle and they're trying to crossbreed. So it probably might have came from the cattle actually that were up
More
there.
than likely.
God damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
Why all these diseases, hey, they always come from this high concentration of animals like the CWD and the mad cow and all this type of stuff, right? It's always damn it. It's always us. We're always our own downfall, right?
Yeah, it seems that way.
Okay, so how many so right now we have there's 2 herds in the parks, right?
Okay, so there are actually 10 parks or national historic sites in Canada that have, I'm talking nationally,
yeah,
that have bison, either wood or plains bison.
Okay. And they're throughout like Alberta, BC, Northwest Territories kind of thing? Or are they in Saskatchewan, Manitoba over there too?
Yeah, Saskatchewan, Manitoba as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, nothing in Ontario, Quebec, and that kind of area?
No, the farthest east is herd in Chittick Lake, Manitoba.
Okay.
And that's not a national park. That's it's on provincial land.
Okay. So those are all parks, or those are all the herds that we know of?
So there's 10 10 public herds of bison that are run by the federal government.
That are managed
by the federal government.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
If we're looking at wild free ranging herds, there are about 13 wood bison and about 6 plains bison. Actually, fewer than that because that includes some display herds.
And that's just in Canada.
In Canada.
Okay. Is there anything going on in the States as far as?
Yeah, they have a
besides Yellowstone, obviously, I guess.
Yeah, they have a large number of, like, there's dozens and dozens of plains bison herds.
Okay.
They only recently, there was a release of wood bison in Alaska. Probably 3 or 4 years ago now.
Oh, okay.
So before that, it was just Canada in North America that had wood bison.
Okay. So what, again, these are all kind of general guesstimations, I'm assuming, but as far as the total population of like plains, and you can break it up by plains and wood separately, however you want to do it, what's the total population in North America that we know of? Obviously, there'll be in the wild herds, there's probably some guessing there, but what is the total number that we have now?
Yeah. So for wood bison, it's probably around 9,000. And for plains bison, it's less than that. I think it's around 3,000, 3,500, something like that.
So still, 12, 13,000 maybe in total at most.
Yep.
So from 30 million or roughly, or maybe more, down to, for the plains, you said 1,000.
About 3,000 for the plains right now, yeah. Or no, it went down to 1,000.
It went down to about 1,000.
Yes.
And the wood buffalo went down to, we don't know.
250.
That was it.
Yeah.
Okay. So down to 1,250 animals, back up to 12,000 in 100 years.
Yeah. Well, in Canada, there's
sorry, that's in Canada. Yeah,
yeah,
right. And they said down in the States they've got, do you know how many they have roughly?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
But would you say it's something relative? It's not like they have 50,000 or something like that?
No, it's, same ballpark.
Same ballpark, roughly 10,000 or so?
Yeah.
Okay. So still very, very few relative to what used to exist.
Absolutely.
100 years ago or more. So obviously there's a lot of current efforts to try and, like you said, there's an increasing amount of attention being paid to bison and bison conservation and bringing them back onto the landscape and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Recently there was that introduction into Banff.
Yes.
Was it 2018? It was 2018 July,
yes.
I think.
Yes.
In the summer. And that was that was what, 30 animals, if I recall?
It's currently around 30. It was 16 animals they shipped there.
16?
Yeah.
Okay. And they released them, and so they're actually, how are they doing? They're doing pretty well then, if they're up to...
Really well.
Yeah, they're doing really, really well.
Yeah.
And that's just in Banff. I'm assuming it's not by town. It's probably some in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
People can't access easily.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. And what is the future like there? What's the hope in Banff? What's the potential, do you think?
Well, it's right now it's part of a 5-year project to so it's an experiment basically to see how well the bison do.
Right.
We have enough evidence to show that bison used to be there.
Sure.
And it even though we only have 30 animals there right now, it does seem like they are potentially starting to have an impact on the environment in the ways that we were hoping they were.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so yeah, in 2 years basically they've doubled their numbers essentially.
Yeah,
right?
Although it's a bit of a trick because we only shipped pregnant females.
That's a nice trick. I like that. Very conservation savvy.
Yeah.
Very smart. So okay.
But they have produced in the wild another batch of calves to get up to the 30.
Okay. Are those original all the ones that were released, are they all collared or anything?
Yeah, exactly.
So they're keeping tabs, so they know
exactly.
What's up. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Those are woods bison that were released there?
No, those are plains bison.
Those were plains bison.
So those are plains bison from Elk Island. Yeah. So basically, Elk Island National Park, the wood and plains, Elk Island is the source of both for almost all of the conservation herds in Canada and also throughout some in the US and some in Russia as well.
Yeah, obviously you don't want to spread that TB and brucellosis if you can help it, so that makes sense. Try to keep that to a minimum.
That is a factor, for sure.
Okay. So one thing, and this I won't go deep into this, just a quick little drive-by, was one thing that has become to my attention was regarding the importance of cultural burning, so indigenous burning, of plains and forest landscapes for the last 13,000 years, up until 100 years ago. There's an argument to be made that played a huge role in keeping plains open and keeping bison habitat open, as well as, you know what I mean? So there was a cohabitation there. And that's been obviously that burning's been eradicated in the national parks. Well, everywhere really. But so is there some thought into that kind of stuff? Like there is? Okay. What?
Yeah, so there's definitely the recognition that, you know, as you say, well, human caused or not, and, you know, as you were mentioning, we are controlling fires and we don't have the fire regime that we used to.
Yeah.
And that is another thing that's impacting biodiversity in areas, because you're getting a lot more old growth forest and fewer plains areas that you know that bison can use, or a number of other species. I just happen to be bison centric.
Yeah, for sure. Probably all of them if you go back far enough. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So there's some thought into. I know they do prescribe burning in the parks and stuff like that, but is there some thought into doing it? Like allowing some indigenous groups in that have the knowledge to do some cultural burning?
I don't know the answer to that, but that's a good question. I mean, there's certainly an awareness that this was an important part of indigenous culture, and Parks Canada, like all of the other federal branches, you know, are trying. The reconciliation process is important, and that would certainly be something that would play into that. So,
it seems like they'd be the ones you'd want to talk to, right?
Exactly.
They're the ones who are going to have that knowledge passed down in order to do such a thing as provide more bison habitat in the park, right? Especially somewhere where there's low risk of, you know what I mean, of burning down someone's cabin or whatever, right? Like that's huge. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. That's be interesting. So what is the impact they're seing there? That you were saying they're having the impact that you were hoping they would have. So what is the ecological impact that you were hoping to see?
So they are grazing in some areas that we're hoping to target, you know, some specific species to sort of decrease the amount of some species, increase the amount of other species just by their grazing pressure.
Okay, and that's been happening.
Awesome. Yes, yeah.
You just reintroduce something that was supposed to be there. It's interesting how, like, the one huge example that's always in the media, right? Is like the Yellowstone National Park and the reintroduction of wolves, right?
Yes.
What do they call it? How wolves change rivers or whatever, right?
Right. Yep.
And just how the reintroduction of that one species that was supposed to be part of the landscape managed to totally alter the landscape into something it was supposed to be, right? And reintroduce that balance, and so it's awesome to see that, you know, at least on a small scale, we're starting to see that with bison a little bit. And it's only been 2 years. So that's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. Are they hoping to continue to release more and more animals into Banff if things go well? Or?
Yeah, unknown at this time. It's still sort of this experimental exploratory process. But the thing with bison is that, you know, they're quite good at making more bison.
Yeah.
So,
just if they do it like rabbits, they do it like bison.
You know, pretty much. Some of the growth rates in some of these populations are just astonishing. But yeah,
awesome. That's cool.
Yeah,
yeah. Is the idea? How excited do you get when you think about the idea of having like more and more bison on the landscape? Of having, you know what I mean? Like of having something.
Absolutely. It's absolutely thrilling, and it's funny for bison conservation, unlike just about any other species in North America, you know, at the turn of the century, people were like, oh, geez, you know, bison are in trouble. We'll put some in zoos, and we'll put some fenced over here. And, you know, it's unlike deer and elk and moose, where we expect to see them free ranging.
Yeah.
You know, people don't expect to see bison free ranging. It's only, you know, relatively recently that they've said this is actually what bison are supposed to be doing. You know, keeping them behind a fence somewhere isn't really truly conserving the species.
Right. It's preservation. Yeah. That's been an interesting thought I've been having, the preservation versus conservation effort. But it's awesome to see that, like, we have come so far in that effort of preservation versus conservation. Right? There's a lot of people putting a lot of resources and thought into all these species, right? Bison being a major one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, for Parks Canada, it's probably our biggest success story, what we've done for bison. But, you know, at the same time, we can't get complacent either.
No, of
we've
course
still got
not.
a long way to go.
It's not over yet.
Mhm.
So what do you think is the long, like obviously now I would assume that you guys are, it's just at a place where like, hey, we just need to try and get these back wherever we can get them back. I'm sure there's not like an, you know what I mean? 200 years down the line, we want to have X number. You're just headed in a direction and you'll see where it takes you, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. So for wood bison, there's a national recovery strategy, and in the national recovery strategy, it lays out short and long-term goals.
Okay.
And the long-term goal is at least five herds of at least 1,000 animals throughout the original range of wood bison that are genetically variable, disease-free, some movement between these herds.
So right now we're working on the disease-free.
The disease-free is a biggie for sure. It's the biggest issue for wood bison conservation right now.
So how does one go about dealing with brucellosis and TB? How do you?
Not easily, that's for sure. They can be difficult to detect from testing, especially tuberculosis. Mm-hmm. And there's never been an instance of people going into a wild herd of bison and vaccinating them and being able to get rid of these diseases. So it's challenging. Absolutely. It's something that we're working pretty hard on right now, trying to figure out what to do. But
what's on the table? Can you discuss that a little bit, or is that something that's kind
of developing better tests, developing better vaccines?
Sure. So I'm assuming you're trying to stay away from the kill them all and start over strategy if possible.
Yeah. So it's
basically that's what I'm wondering. Are we at a place where it's like I know when chronic wasting disease started in Alberta, when it started to spread from the States, there was a massive eradication effort where they're like, hey, we just got to kill this small population, and just because we can't stop it. Like, this is an invincible disease that we have to just stop. And that was shut down by public scrutiny because people don't like deer being shot from helicopters, apparently, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You're the one who knows probably way more about this than I do. So my question is, how much of a lost cause is the brucellosis and TB thing in bison? Is it to the level of CWD, or is it?
It's not going to go away on its own.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, we've done, astonishingly well at keeping the diseases within and, slightly outside of Wood Buffalo National Park, so it hasn't spread to any of the other disease-free herds.
Which is awesome. That's a huge accomplishment in and of itself. So that's got to take a massive amount of resources just to pull that off.
Yeah, and we want to continue doing that for sure. Yeah. And in the short term and in the long term, figure out ways to eliminate the threat of disease spread as opposed to just treating it as it comes up, I guess.
Right. How do you know if the vaccinations have worked or not? Because I imagine it's got to be difficult to measure that, right? So I'm guessing the hope there would be
in the lab, basically.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So the hope there would be that the ones that have TB and brucellosis will eventually die out, and the new ones that are vaccinated will eventually. You know what I mean? So it'll just kind of be killed off by attrition, sort of thing. Like it'll be, okay, that's the hope. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's a one possible way of treating it for sure.
Okay, and how likely do you think that is? With obviously, I'm sure it takes time to develop an effective vaccine for bison, something that we haven't tried to do, I'm sure, for very long. So how is that the plan A? That's
Yeah, it's something we're definitely looking at, absolutely, right. And I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to come up with something.
So it's looking like it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah,
got a lot of smart minds, I'm assuming,
exactly.
looking into it and working diligently. So that's good. That's awesome. So it's just good to hear you don't have to go in and just murder them all for the sake of future conservation, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's so many reasons why that would be an issue in Wood Buffalo National Park with this unbroken relationship with wolves. If you get rid of 5,000 bison and you have wolves that are used to eating those bison, then what happens?
Yeah. Trophic cascade to the max, yeah.
Exactly. You also have an extremely valuable herd from a genetic perspective that if you went in and got rid of those animals, then you'd be really losing out on the genetic diversity too.
Mm-hmm. So is it roughly 5,000? So of the 12,000 bison we have in Canada, we think roughly 5,000 of them are diseased, or they're in the disease area, I should say.
Pretty much, yeah.
Whew, that is a challenge.
Yeah.
That's bananas. Wow. Well, I admire you guys for looking into it and trying to figure it out, because that sounds like a hell of an effort. Yeah, that's wild. Another thing I wanted to discuss was outside of, like we were discussing before, but we'll go through it again now that we're recording and my computer's not being annoying, was the whole issue with bison in Alberta. Is this just in Alberta or is this Canada-wide, the livestock thing?
Alberta.
It's just Alberta. So in Alberta, bison that are not within a bison management area, so not necessarily a park, right? It's just a bison management area.
Exactly,
so
yep.
They are considered, they're not under any protected or threatened status or anything like that. They're considered a livestock, and there's no regulations around them.
Yeah, so there's basically 3 different listings for bison in Alberta. The ones in the Hazama area in northwestern Alberta are considered wildlife.
Yeah.
And there are 2 areas where they're listed as what's called a subject animal under the Alberta Wildlife Act. And so that's in sort of just south of Wood Buffalo National Park and an area just outside of Banff National Park.
Okay.
In case the Banff animals wander outside of the park, then they do have some protection there provincially.
Gotcha.
Elsewhere, there is no protection for wood bison or plains bison at the moment on provincial land.
Right.
And part of the reason for that is it's when you're talking about it being a big effort to ensure these diseases don't spread. That's one of the ways that has been used to make sure these diseases don't spread is have areas where bison don't have protection, and basically they're areas where we don't really want bison to be right now because there's the concern of the spread of the disease from disease to disease-free herds.
Okay, so that's not a loophole. It's something that was done on purpose.
That's right. As
a response to these diseases.
That's right. Yeah.
So okay, so until these diseases are taken care of, I'm assuming that will be a standing status. Livestock status up until we sort that out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the province would be better people to ask than myself.
No, for sure, of course.
I mean, it's in for a reason, but
yeah, it's not an oversight. That's what I assumed when I first came. I was like, that's a huge oversight.
Yeah,
but that makes perfect sense. Okay, so I guess even the people anyone that is, shooting a bison outside of that zone probably has to get that thing tested to make sure that it's not. I would assume if it's the reason.
They don't have to.
They don't have to. Well, I know they don't have to, but for their own safety, would it be probably prudent to do so?
Yeah, and I believe the province has some available media releases, I guess, as to how best to look at that.
Sure. Yeah, it's the whole story about bison is just like it's friggin' bananas. Like it's just crazy to think about that we've gone from the species that was so prominent, the prominent large land mammal on the face of North America. By a large degree, apparently, and it existed for 100,000 years, and now it's in a matter of 12 years or so, it went down to a couple thousand, or no, sorry, we even say it was 1,250 or whatever, and then we managed in 100 years, managed to bring it back up with very concerted efforts into a lot, right? You managed to increase the number 1,000%. Which is huge. Yep. That's just in Canada. That's not including what's been done in the States. And I'm sure the equally amount of concerted effort down there to make sure this happens. So I love seeing those conservation stories that are like big successes like that. Like one is the trumpeter swans too, right? Like that's I had Mark Heckbert on talking about that and how that was such a dire problem at the turn of the century. And in 100 years, we managed to turn it around. And they're still a species of concern, but there's thousands of them available or out there now, right? So that's only because of concerted efforts around conservation and paying attention to it and doing it, and it's hugely beneficial. I mean, some people may see it as just a benefit to those of us who like nature, right? Which, I mean, it seems like a pretty human thing to be into nature, but if you don't like nature, maybe you should check your priorities. But obviously, there's implications, like we said, ecologically and therefore sustainably. For everybody, for everything, right? So it's great to see that this is happening. Do you ever think, like, in your wildest dreams, when you think about the future of bison in North America, what do you imagine being possible?
I imagine larger herds of free-ranging animals. that are going over, federal land, provincial crown land, reserve land. I think that working with indigenous groups there are a number of indigenous groups that are really, really interested in getting bison back on the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is kind of the next step in bison recovery and bison conservation is working with these groups. And they have a lot of land, and a lot of them want bison on that land.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think it'll be mostly, I'm assuming it's not going to be in the plains, because like the plains are kind of occupado right at the moment. But I mean, obviously that would be cool, but I mean, the economic machine, I don't imagine is stopping for a species like that. So I'm assuming that would be cool, but like I'm assuming the concerted effort will be in the boreal forest. And
I think that there are still areas in the plains where we can target and try to get relatively larger herds of plains bison free ranging out there.
That's awesome. I just imagine the media coverage of some family in a minivan slamming into a bull bison on the highway or something, and we gotta kill them all, management or whatever, right? So
people are used to having deer and elk and moose, these other large ungulates out on the landscape, right?
Yeah. Although bison's a different level.
You don't want to hit one, that is for sure.
If you hit a 350-pound black bear, it destroys a vehicle. I can't imagine what hitting a 2,000-pound chunk of meat is going to do to your vehicle.
Yeah, they're dense.
Yeah, but still, I agree. Like it would be really cool to see from a lot of different angles, like culturally, very much for indigenous groups too, right? Because right now, I think a lot of, especially the northern groups, a lot of their focus is on moose and that kind of stuff, because that's their next thing. And I don't know. I don't know traditionally if they were always on moose or if bison was a big part of their thing. But if it was, it seems like it would be a cool another increase for them, right? For indigenous communities to have that traditional resource back on the landscape for them to harvest and do with what they need to do with, right? For cultural purposes, but also who knows what the future of the future ecology of that landscape might look like with that keystone species back on the land, right?
Yeah, and with climate change, it kind of seems like bison may be fairly well adapted to what the climate is going to become and what the landscape is going to become. So they could be, like you say, another resource that could be available to people for food.
I guess the thought there is that the increase, the pushback of the parkland up like further north, so increase the amount
opening meadow areas,
opening plains, and allowing more grazing area and that kind of stuff. Okay.
Not that I'm pro climate change, but
no. Well, there's pros and cons to everything,
exactly.
Right? Climate change. There's going to be lots of things. There's going to be lots of industries that benefit hugely from climate change, right? And there'll be lots of benefits. There'll be a lot of negatives too that go with it. It's just the extremes are going to be extreme.
yeah. Like we currently have plains bison from Mexico to Alaska, so they're pretty well adapted to living in different circumstances.
Yeah, they've made it work for sure.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I heard, and this was from the book. Almost all of my information came from that book because I'm lazy, but I read it twice, so maybe that's not lazy. But also, I looked into your research as well. And don't worry, I was doing research. But one really interesting thing I heard was there was a point, I don't remember where it was, and you probably know about it, where the researchers tried to figure out the cold tolerance of animals. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, probably from the book as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And there was something about, and I'll quote Stephen Ranella on this one. So if we can look into his book, and I'm sure the references are in there somewhere. But yeah, they tried to find the cold tolerance of a bunch of different animals, from like pigs and deer and cows and moose and everything. And I think they even got muskox. And so like I don't remember, I'm paraphrasing, but I think the muskox is what they were measuring was the temperature at which their metabolic rate changed, indicating that they had to change their metabolism to deal with the cold, right? And the muskox, I think it was pretty cold. It was like minus 20 Celsius or something like that. So that's like for them to be totally fine up until that point is amazing. They said they couldn't find it for bison.
Yeah,
which is nuts.
Yeah,
and they managed to get it to -40 or -35, I think, and they said they weren't unaffected, which is bananas. To say that species is cool with hotter weather is weird.
And I agree with you. But so we've introduced bison to Sakha Republic in Russia.
Oh, okay.
So wood bison it's just like in the Yakutsk, if you know where that is, but really eastern Russia, and it's cold there. It's like -45, fairly regularly, and the bison are happy as clams.
Probably not a lot of folks up there either.
No, there's not a lot of anything up there.
Bison are killing it though.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities there. Like it's a fascinating story because they're clearly, like, biologically speaking, they're very resilient species because they can handle the extreme hots, the extreme colds.
Yep.
They can handle pressure from most natural predators, and they're very resilient.
Yes.
Until the rifle shows up.
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, apparently they're not very well adapted to deal with someone shooting a piece of lead from 500 yards away where they can't even see them. So it's wild that it took us, like the ultimate predator, to just, you know what I mean, to basically destroy that species in all intents and purposes, right? So it seems like it seems like you're right. Like there is a huge amount of opportunity there to bring them back. It seems like they'll kind of take care of themselves almost once they're there, right?
Yeah, and so I agree. And a lot of conservation recovery efforts, a number of species, they need pretty intense work at the beginning.
Caribou, right?
Yeah.
Perfect example. Like, it seems like we might be taking care of them forever. It seems like we may never get back to a woodland caribou herd that's totally self-sustaining, right? So I'm not a professional at that. I'm just like, that's what I gathered from the literature that I've read. But it seems like bison, maybe.
Yeah, if you don't need a captive breeding program, really. If you can find space for them where you can leave them alone, they're probably going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is awesome. That's probably pretty relieving for you guys to know that, like, if we can figure out a place to put them, they'll be all right.
Which is a challenge, but yeah.
Well, I can't imagine. Yeah, trying to find a place to put them where they're going to not contact diseases and not become a problem for people, and not. Yeah. Like I said, I have a wild, and I'm sure it's going to be a lifelong fascination with bison at this point because they seem to have such a mystique where they represent so much now to society. They represent that, the glacial period. They represent indigenous rise and fall of indigenous people, right? And the massive amount of sustainability they managed to coexist together. They also represent the importance of bison to the establishment of North American culture, like our culture, like you and me, and everything we have going on. Our society now was built on a bedrock of bison bones, right? And like it's massively important to our current society, but also is representative of the greed of a population as well as the success, right? Yeah. So it's, and so much more. I'm sure there's many other interpretations of it, but they're a fascinating species, and I every time I see one, it blows my mind because they're just so big, and there's nothing like them, right? They're incredible.
Absolutely. There's nothing like them, and I feel very honored and privileged to have been able to work with them for as long as I have. Yeah,
no kidding. Yeah, it's a cool thing. So, anyways, final thoughts. This is an hour and 30 minutes here already. It goes by. Any final thoughts or anything you wanted to kind of conclude with? Anything, maybe information that Parks wants to get out, or how people can get involved, anything like that?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest message from Parks is just how involved we have been and continue to be in bison conservation, and that we're not there yet. We're looking at the next step for bison conservation.
Yeah, and constant work on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, man. Well, this was enlightening. This was a cool conversation. It went better than I had hoped it would go, and I'm really happy to have had it. This is going to be a great episode. I think people are going to love it. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on, man.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. Wasn't that awesome? I was blown away by all of Greg's knowledge, his understanding of the species, and his appreciation for them. I couldn't ask for a better person to come in to talk about this. So yeah, that was awesome. Everything and more that I ever wanted to talk about with Bison. I mean, yeah, within an hour and a half, how much more can you stuff in there? Thanks a lot, guys. If you like the podcast, make sure to rate and review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're at. Share with your friends, tell somebody about it. That's the best thing you can do. It's a free podcast. So I appreciate any help you guys can give me. Just get the message out there. So thank you very much. And catch you guys next time. Take it easy.